is storytelling. Tonight, we honor the spirit of William Sampson, a name you might not recognize right off the bat, but as the night goes on, you'll see that he has seeped into your consciousness already through movies in the past, through artwork. Tonight is the night we tell the story of that. On a bigger level, tonight is also a night that we celebrate what we all here stand for, which is thinking outside the box, is knowing the highest in you and not being afraid to walk forward in that. And that's what tonight is dedicated to. So we're going to start with a short film, a documentary hosted by William Sampson about Native American and how that tribe and how that group of people were portrayed in Westerns, and how thinking outside of the box is how we step into the future. So, John, you want to roll him?
The following is a production of KCTS, Seattle.
Major funding for this program was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the National Endowment for the Arts. Additional funding was provided by the Lilly Endowment.
From the earliest days, the Western has been the bread and butter movie of the film industry. From 1913 to the present, Hollywood has produced over 2,000 feature films on cowboys and Indians. The idea that Indians are quaint and strange but not quite human is an idea created and perpetuated by Hollywood movies.
What? Great!
Hello, I'm Will Sampson. The movies have consistently shown the Indian as a savage warrior, a renegade, a killer of innocent pioneer women and children, and a merciless scalper who used the most cruel means of torture in his vicious attacks against the white man. That is the legacy that Hollywood has left the Indian people. It is our worldwide image. This is the second in a series of programs dealing with how and why it came about, and examining the effects that these Hollywood images, which are seen nightly on television and movie screens throughout the world, is having on our people, especially our youngsters. You know, for most people, the Native American remains invisible unless he looks like the Hollywood Indian.
We waited years for you to say that you were wrong to have pictured us this way. But it's too late, the time has come for all false images to come undone.
One thing you will discover when you get next to one another is everybody needs some elbow room, elbow room. It's nice when you're kind of cozy, but not when you're tangled nose to nosy. Oh, everybody needs some elbow, needs a little elbow room. That's how it was in the early days of the USA. The people kept a coming to settle, though the East was the only place there was to go. The president was Thomas Jefferson. He made a deal with Napoleon. How'd you like to sell a mile or two?
Or 3, or 100, or 1,000.
And so in 1803 the Louisiana Territory was sold to us without a fuss and gave us lots of elbow room. Oh, elbow room, elbow room. Got to get us some elbow room. It's the West or bust. In God we trust. There's a new land out there. Lewis and Clark volunteered to go. Goodbye, good luck, wear your overcoat. They prepared for good times and for bad, and for bad. They hired a Sacagawea to be their guide. She led them all across the countryside, reached the coast, and found the most elbow room we've ever had.
Attributing one of the most powerful and controversial historical dramas ever played by man to the simple need for elbow room is a grotesque distortion of reality. Millions of children watching Saturday morning TV are repeatedly taught that Indians, like high mountains, raging rivers, blazing hot deserts, are just inconvenient stumbling blocks to be overcome on the white man's road to progress.
Now, there were plenty of fights to win land rights, but the West was meant to be. It was a manifest destiny. The trappers, traders, and the peddlers, the politicians and the settlers.
Oh, everybody's missing some good part was going on.
Come on, kids, come to the dining room.
I
I want to show you something. Okay, kids. Before we talk about how Hollywood has rewritten history, I think we should look at some of the major events that led up to the great expansion west that movie makers have been so fascinated with for over 70 years. This is the way it pretty much was when the Pilgrims first landed here. The Wampanoag Nation here, the Iroquois Confederacy here. There were numerous small tribes populating the eastern seaboard, although many of them were wiped out when colonization began. The Pilgrims relied quite heavily on Indian friendship. The Indians fed them, protected them, and gave them their democratic form of government. With nothing in the European political experience of empires and kingdoms to equal the democratic constitution of the Iroquois Confederacy, Benjamin Franklin used it as a model for the Articles of Confederation, the forerunner of the United States Constitution, with its provisions for initiative, referendum, and recall, suffrage for women as well as men, the pattern of states within a state that we call federalism, the habit of treating chiefs as servants instead of masters, and the insistence that the community must respect the diversity of men and the diversity of their dreams. There's little wonder that the greatest teachers of American democracy went to school with the Indians. Indians were then used as pawns in the Revolutionary War by both sides. The Americans gained their Indian allies with promises and treaties guaranteeing the tribes equal status with the colonies, recognizing both their rights and property. The British enlisted the aid of some tribes by promising to limit colonial expansion west. But when the shooting was over, all the promises were forgotten in the rush to steal the land. This film, as most about this period in history, only show the Indians as enemies of the Americans.
However, in this case, we made a good beginning.
I'd say it was more than that, sir.
We paid $15 million, and we got a lot of real estate. We know it stretches from the Mississippi River to the Continental Divide. That's all we do know about it.
In the teacher's guide that goes out with the elbow room film through the public schools, it says that it was our manifest destiny to overspread the continent allotted by Providence for the free development of our multiplying millions. What about manifest destiny of the Native Americans? Who gave Napoleon the right to sell the land, or Jefferson the right to buy it?
But we don't own that territory.
Neither does anyone else. That's the point.
No one seriously considered the Native American's right to own his own homeland. All the European had to do was to walk through it, and it was his. That's manifest destiny.
By right of exploration, I claim for the United States of America all the land we have traveled, from the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific Ocean.
Tribe after tribe and nation after nation succumbed to the relentless acquisition of their lands. They were forced to cede their properties for no more than the promise that if they moved farther west, they would never be bothered again. But in the early 1800s, literally millions of immigrants flooded our shores, and their lust for elbow room was insatiable. Indian removal was effected in a haphazard manner for several years until it was established as a national policy with the election of General Andrew Jackson as President of the United States. The southern states had been trying desperately to get the southern tribes moved off their traditional homelands. To that end, they brought tremendous pressure to bear upon the federal government.
Mr. President, the state of Georgia has enacted legislation making it illegal for an Indian to testify in a court of law.
Sir, in their eagerness to expel the Indians from their state, they've clearly ignored the provisions of the Hopewell Treaty, and they've overstepped the bounds of states' rights.
Gentlemen.
In spite of the promises made in the Hopewell Treaty of 1785 or the Georgia Pact of 1802, if the state of Georgia wishes to extend her laws over the Indians within her borders, to expel them from the state, to dissolve their governments, it's a legitimate exercise of state sovereignty, and we should not interfere. The only solution to the Indian problem is to remove them to that territory west of the Mississippi called Oklahoma. It's only for their own good.
It didn't really matter that these tribes were advanced in learning and permanently established on the soil, or that they'd built homes, towns, roads, mills, and schools, developed their own educational systems, published their own newspapers, cultivated the land, raised various crops, including tobacco and cotton. No, what mattered was that these tribes owned and controlled the richest farmland east of the Mississippi, and gold had been discovered.
Gentlemen, the President of the United States, Mr. Andrew Jackson, would like to have a word with you.
After one of the bitterest debates in the history of Congress, Jackson's Indian Removal Bill was enacted into law on May 28, 1830. Later that summer, he met with a delegation of Chickasaw leaders and told them that Congress had made a new law and that they would be compelled to remove to the west.
By act of Congress, it has been placed in my power to extend to you justice, to pay for the expenses of your removal, to support you for 12 months, and to give you tracts of land that will endure as long as the grass grows and the water runs.
About this. I carry this implement with me always. This is a United States Army issue tomahawk, issued to the soldiers for scalping Indians. It's a device they learned from the British. The British authorities used to pay their soldiers 20 pounds for the scalp of any Indian, any tribe. They'd also pay 10 pounds for the scalp of any Indian child, any tribe, either boy or girl. General Scott is building 12 camps, stockades, concentration camps, if you will. They're open camps, open to the weather. And that's where our white brethren are putting us. And then when we're all collected, and the whole nation is collected, save those who've gone on before us, we're to be marched. 1,000 miles we're to be marched. There are 5,000 men coming in now to round us up. Soldiers, militia, guardsmen, volunteers. They form into small groups of 2 or 3 and they go out collecting Indians. They're being instructed to approach quietly. At mealtime, for example, General Scott suggests. So in this manner, they'll take us entirely by surprise. In this considered way, your countrymen plans to remove the entire Cherokee nation by total surprise. Remove them to the west while we sit down to supper.
And so, the Chickasaws, Cherokees, Choctaws, Creeks, and Seminoles, 14,000 souls in all, were driven like cattle through rain, snow, and summer heat. More than 4,000 died on the way, leaving a path of graves extending from the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia to the Oklahoma Territory known as the Trail of Tears.
The removal of the 5 civilized tribes was just the beginning of it. During the next 10 years, Andrew Jackson and his successor, Martin Van Buren, forced the signing of over 100 treaties, and through military force, deported over 125,000 woodland Indians onto the plains. By now, you're probably wondering what all this has to do with Hollywood stereotyping the Indian.
The point is really quite simple. Hollywood has never dealt adequately with the fact that Native Americans are real people.
The movies, for the most part, have perpetuated the myth of manifest destiny. The idea that might makes right has pervaded every Western film to some degree. One of the more blatant examples is MGM's How the West Was Won. In the prologue, it states, and I quote, "The West had to be won from nature and from primitive man." Even films that are supposedly pro-Indian, like Soldier Blue, ultimately justify the white atrocities by first setting the stage with Indians committing mindless acts of terror.
Willie!
The West, with its majestic and expansive settings, gives movie makers the room to stage endless battles and conflicts, the meat of the Hollywood Western. However, the reasons that Native Americans were forced into a brief, hopeless, life-death struggle on the plains has never been explored or explained. Instead, action has been the major concern. The word movie itself implies action, and action sells theater tickets. Most action westerns have revolved around either direct or implied confrontations with the Apache and Sioux, perhaps because the 2 main trails west cross both of their respective lands. In any event, Hollywood recognized only 3 basic types of Indians, which is supported by the fact that the studios have only 3 types of Indian wardrobe.
The Sioux or Plains kit, the Apache garb, and other. Other plus a combination of any of the 3 was used to depict over 400 other tribes,
thus creating a Hollywood sameness for all Indians. This movie stereotype has become so effective that all you have to do is show a lurking Indian once in a while, and you create instant tension and suspense. As in The Man from Laramie, you're led to believe that this Indian is the villain. As it turns out, he's not even remotely connected to the plot. In most Westerns, the Indians are only there to provide a dramatic backdrop for the white characters to play against, as in this film. The writer's logic is difficult to follow, but basically the story is about a crooked wagon train boss who's leading a group of settlers to their land claims, which happen to be in the valley that belongs to the Arapaho tribe. The heroes undo the villain by showing that he has staked out the middle of the valley for himself. This is where it gets complicated. The Arapaho village sits right on top of the villain's land claim. Everyone oohs and ahs, perhaps out of concern for the Indians. Then it's pointed out that it is also the most valuable land because it's the only place to build a town. That's when they get mad. In any case, the Indians lose their valley, but it's okay because the bad guy eventually gets killed and the good guys take it over. At least that's how the writer sees it.
Here are your claims. And here's the Arapaho village, right in the middle, surrounded by your claims. Is it any wonder Chief Antelope and his people don't want you? Oh, just a minute. Captain Baring, you haven't marked in your claim. Where is it? I'll tell you. Right in the middle, where the Indian village is now. The only place where you people can build your town, the most profitable land in the valley.
My land is my business.
It's exactly the way the Arapaho feel. They've agreed to a meeting with you. Will you talk to them?
We're ready. Sure, we'll talk. With bullets.
Buffy St. Marie blames white writers for the plight of Indians in movies. Would you agree that they deserve much of the blame?
Well, I would think so. In the tradition of early serials, probably, I'm not too familiar with Zane Grey, Stewart Edward White, and all the original writers of Western stories, but I imagine it's a hangover from those scripts, and I mean those original stories that were serialized, and I imagine when motion pictures started that they still kept in that tradition.
Already in the 19th century, when James Fenimore Cooper wrote his Last of the Mohicans, you had either the romantic Indian, which was Uncas, the Last of the Mohicans, or you had the savage Indian. And by the time the 20th century came around, and the big magazines began to run Westerns about 1920, 22, when Zane Grey was big, he wrote a book called The Vanishing American. And this, again, was a romantic Indian. And the idea of the plot was that a white girl, blonde hair, blue-eyed, came out to the Navajo reservation to help the Indian. And by the end of the book, which was a serial in Ladies' Home Journal, the two of them are going to be married, and they're going to cross the two races and build a stronger race. Well, there was so much excitement and opprobrium caused by this to the general public that when they came to publish it as a novel, Harper and Brothers told Zane Grey that he had to change now. The ending of this book, he could not have them married. This was absolutely forbidden. So he has him die, Nofai, as Indian, at the end of the book. He dies, and there's this, again, romantic image, and his last words are more or less vanishing, vanishing, vanishing. Mm-hmm. By the time they came to make the movie, of course, they changed this even more and had cast Richard Dix in the role and Lois Wilson, because they two were a pair in Zane Grey Westerns, why she then took the schoolteacher part. So after the problem of the Ladies' Home Journal and Zane Grey's Vanishing American, then it became a standard magazine policy not to present a sympathetic point of view of the Indian, or much less the Indian as a central character. So that as you move into the 30s and the 40s, you have Luke Short writing a serial for the Post called Ambush. Again, it's an Apache renegade, but you never see why he's a renegade. You never understand him. You have Ernest Haycox writing Bugles in the Afternoon about Little Bighorn, but again, you never see the Indian point of view. James Warner Bella comes and writes his stories of Fort Stark and the cavalry against the Apache and the Comanche. And these stories that he wrote in the Post, John Ford used as a basis for his cavalry trilogy. But again, you can't see the Indian's point of view, and here again it's the Post. Then comes Alan LeMay, and he writes a book called The Searchers. And he writes another one called The Unforgiven. Again, the Post is the publisher, and again, you don't see the Indian point of view. And so when Hollywood filmmakers then bought these stories to bring them to the screen, you didn't see the Indian point of view either because it wasn't in the original book. But the authors, Luke Short, Ernest Haycox, or whoever might be writing the story, couldn't do any different. If they did, the editor wouldn't buy it. And it was very lucrative, I think, more lucrative to write a magazine serial than it was to publish a book. A book might sell only 5,000 copies. Magazines paid $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 for serial rights. So you wrote it the way the editors wanted it.
The Unforgiven, directed by John Huston, is probably the most anti-Native American film ever made.
Don't touch me! And get out of this house! Dirty Injun with your Injun ways! Ain't you done enough? Wound yourself around my son Charlie to get yourself a litter of half-breeds to run around my Charlie's cabin? Squaw! Kiowa squaw!
Media is the most powerful force shaping the thoughts and opinions of people, especially the young. The average American child spends approximately 16,000 hours watching movies and television, and only 10,000 hours in school.
And yellow hair send wagon, soldier, and speaking wire.
Yes, Kayo. Beti digi ateko. Nishi digi ateko. Chibil icho.
Tomorrow we will be like ghosts.
This film, while not directly about Indians, treats the scenes that do concern Indians with sensitivity and accurately portrays the feelings that many tribes held toward the blacks for their participation as soldiers in the cavalry. Perhaps the reason this film presents such a positive Indian image is because the black Americans involved in it are aware of the impact of the stereotype.
We need our guns, bullets, and powder for our own fight.
Tell him his enemies are our enemies.
Nihi anahabi an ahabi.
Dani hibi hod. Badidene anashi. Binaika naiskaili.
You say you black people fought with that enemy against us.
I ain't in the army no more.
He knows, Buck. No guns. No bullets.
Unfortunately, for every movie like Buck and the Preacher, there are literally hundreds like this one that are shown over and over again on television screens throughout the world.
It's the bugle. They're blowing the charge.
Our cheering for the cavalry bit just now was a little joke. But it has happened. Our children are just as susceptible to the intense feeling of sympathy for the good guy and hatred for the bad guy so skillfully generated by the makers of movie drama. What makes it understandable and even easy for our kids to root for our own people to get it is that they don't readily recognize themselves, their families, or the tribe in the stereotyped caricatures Hollywood has convinced the world are Indians.
Truth, the lost from sight, will change the world when it's finally brought to light. And so we say again that all false images must come to an end.
Stereotypes. I think it's just as funny that Indian kids would watch Westerns and want to be the cowboy, because I grew up watching Westerns wanting to be the Indian. At this point in time, we've blended so much in our consciousness, I think it's just important to know the truth. And in that, we can walk through celebrating our past, just to know the truth, all sides of it. I think that's one of the things that William Sampson started to do, was portray the not the stereotypical Indian through movies, and through the movies that he did, break that mold and dare to step out. That's what we all have in common here sitting in the room, or we wouldn't be here tonight. So tonight we'd like to step into the artwork of William Sampson as well, brought to us by the best person possible, a partner of his that walked through time and knows the truth. And I'd like to welcome her to our stage, Miss Zoe Escobar.
Thank you very much. You're perfect.
It's like dancing.
Yeah, that's what I do dance.
I like it. We're almost there.
Okay.
A couple steps. Yay, we made it.
And I didn't get the gun.
Another warm welcome for Mrs. Zoe Escobar.
Okay. I'm not.
It's almost there. Almost plugged in.
Oh, that's what happened. There we go. Okay, well, I would like to thank you all for coming while I share some highlights of Beyond Cuckoo's Nest, The Art and Life of William Sampson, Jr. Actually, the book in its entirety is a series of highlights from his life. He had so many I couldn't get them all in one book. Likewise, his paintings. Although his name was Will Sampson, his family nickname was Sonny. That's what I called him, and that's how I'll refer to him tonight. He was an American Indian cowboy who was my dear friend and mentor. He talked about Indians and cowboys, and I say that in the book. Indian cowboy is like an oxymoron. We know there were Indians and there were cowboys, but a cowboy Indian, who'd heard of that? But there were many, many talented cowboy Indians, and he was one of them. And he was pretty, too. He was a full-blood member of the Creek Nation in Oklahoma. Many remember him as Chief Brompton in the '76 movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson. What many did not know is he was an award-winning painter. I first met this cowboy while working as a receptionist at his business manager's office. He strode in tall and confident, dressed in Wrangler jeans, slightly worn Justin boots, and a well-worn cowboy hat with a shoulder-length ponytail hanging down his back. He was wearing a gold and silver belt buckle from his winning bull riding days. Sonny was spelled out in silver letters on the back of his belt. He stood 6'5" and weighed about 250 pounds. He was a friendly, charming Indian cowboy with an almost bashful smile. I was behind. There's the bashful smile. And then here's another one, a version of his facial expressions. I read this one as enough, loudly but silently expressed to the photographer. I quickly found something else to do. William Sampson Jr., Sonny to his friends and his family. Kuscany, Creek language meaning left hand, which he was, made his presence known in September 27, 1933, weighing 11 pounds on Grandma's meat scale in the kitchen. After 2 girls, Mabel wanted a boy, and there he was. Right away, she dubbed him Sonny Boy. From the time he could hold a pencil, he would draw, and it was always animals. If he couldn't find pencil or paper, he would draw on the ground. He was a self-taught painter. It is said he sold his first painting at the age of 3. No one knows what it was or who purchased it, but his sister had this painting dated 1938. That would make him 5 when he painted this picture. And this is a church weekend event. They went to church once a month, and they spent the weekend, and that's how they went. He never rode in the wagon. He always walked on the ground with the dogs. He was always with the animals. Sonny's father worked as a ranch hand and taught Sonny the calf roping and all aspects of working a ranch. He's 17 in that picture. He was a natural horseman and began working local rodeos. Later, he mastered every rodeo event and became an all-around cowboy star and performer. He worked as a lumberjack, construction worker, oil field roughneck, telephone lineman, and wrangler. I can always get a job, he said. I can do anything. There's a self-portrait of some of it, the lineman. You see the roughneck, oil field roughneck behind his back. So he kind of covered most everything there. Sonny, the young man, is a struggling and award-winning painter, dealt in broad landscapes, ranching, cowboys, horses, buffalo, and Indian scenes. He painted from what he observed during his childhood as a young man in rural Oklahoma, several seasons on the rodeo circuit, and working as a ranch hand in Oklahoma and Arizona. Sonny was a Western cowboy Indian artist, painting in the style of Charles Russell, but with his own sense of what it was to be Native American, taking as his subjects his ancestors, the land, the hard days and opportunities seen by a Creek Indian in the 20th century America. His works have been exhibited at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., the Almond Carter Museum, the Gilcrease Museum in Texas, the Philbrook Art Museum in Oklahoma, Chieftain's Gallery, and the Creek Council House in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. This picture and the next one, that's a stickball game before it became lacrosse. And these two, the one before, this one, the women's ribbon, and this one is hanging now as on view at the Creek Council House. That's only 2 that I know where the originals are. And I was always thrilled because my husband Dave, he plays lacrosse, and it was a stickball game. All natives had stickball games, and sometimes they settled disagreements between tribes playing the stickball. They didn't wear helmets or anything, you can see there. He was among the outstanding Indian artists who exhibited at the Smithsonian Institute in the Americas Discovers Indian Art exhibition held in Washington, D.C. in '67. And he was honored as Outstanding Indian of the Year at the 47th Annual American Indian Exposition held in Anadarko, Oklahoma in 1979. All of his drawings and sketches, paintings were from his memory. He never used a photograph. Heritage and size caused him problems. Drunks and bars always wanted to take on the big Indian in a fight. I've been chased, shot at, stomped on, and locked up, he said, more than once. When prodded about a fight he'd gotten into in a bar in Farmington, New Mexico, he snarled, "I eat rednecks." After further prodding, he told the story. After a hard day's work, I walked into this bar and I ordered a beer, he said. The guy next to me picked up a full quart of whiskey and hit me in the face with it. What did Sonny do? I laughed at him, he said. Then he fainted with some help from me. When asked if he'd ever been seriously hurt in such a brawl, I've never been knocked unconscious by a white man, he said. Sonny's movie career started with the producers of Cuckoo's Nest chasing him around the rodeo circuit for a year and a half before finally pinning him down. I don't know what they wanted me for, except it must have been something I'd done, he said. Each time they got close, I just loaded up and rode out. Producers Michael Douglas and Saul Zaentz finally caught up with the help of Mel Lambert, a man of all trades, including rodeo announcer and cowboy art fan. Mel knew Sonny as a painter and champion bull rider. Mel assured Sonny that it was safe to meet these guys. They might even have a job for him. Sonny was directing an art show in Yakima, Washington at the time. As soon as Sonny walked in the door for the interview, the director, Milos Forman, claimed he'd found his Indian. Sonny thought, why not? I don't have anything to do and I need a job. He never studied acting and actually never liked movies. He had become disturbed by the way Indians were portrayed in Western movies. He hated Hollywood's treatment of Native American actors and the inaccurate scripts being produced. He said Indians laughed at how they were shown in movies. They know it isn't true, so they don't take it seriously. Producers had long believed that Indians were too stoic to display emotion on the screen. That is right, Sonny said. There are good Indian actors. Indians can laugh and cry just like anyone else. They laugh very easily. They have needed a sense of humor to endure what they have. Fame, however, did not impress Sonny, nor did the fact that in his first 4 acting roles, he worked with 4 of the most bankable male stars in Hollywood. Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Clint Eastwood in Outlaw Josie Wales, Paul Newman and Outlaw, there he is there, Outlaw Josie Wales. There's 10 Bears. Looks mean, huh? Buffalo Bill and the Indians, and Charles Bronson in White Buffalo, where he paid Sitting Bull. I forget who he played now. He regarded movies as a pleasant, profitable pastime, but not much more than that. So I went through the rest of his movies. That one is Richard Harris in Orca, and that's Poltergeist, Craig T. Nelson. And that's a movie, he did a movie called Fish Hawk. It was a Canadian production, and he starred in it. It was the only movie that an Indian really starred in. And it was a good movie. And that's Firewalker with Lou Gossett Jr. That was his last movie. Firewalker with Lou. I called him Lou Gossett Jr., but when I called to get permission to use the picture, he called me. He called me back. I was just talking to his office. He called me back, and he said, oh, yeah, go ahead. But they called him Louis Gossett Jr. So I corrected myself. He refused roles worth several millions of dollars because the Indian image portrayed in the film was inaccurate and demeaning. Money was never a priority to him. If there were meetings regarding Native Americans, Sonny never felt he needed an invitation. It was his nature to just show up. He usually stood quietly in the back of the room. I don't like to talk. I'd rather listen. It's not Indian way to talk about oneself. When Sonny did talk, he spoke about his concern for traditional Indian values. He spoke about spiritual ways in a culture that's not based on profit or greed, but one that is in tune with man's needs on earth. He agreed with what Sitting Bull had said nearly 100 years before. The love of possessions is a disease among the whites. Sonny began to feel responsibility. He sent illustrated letters. When he wrote a letter, that's how he wrote a letter. Sonny began to feel his responsibility to Native children as a role model. He wanted to be someone Indian children could respect. In between roles, he found the time to travel to Indian reservations and towns to speak on their behalf about their problems. With only a 9th grade education, Sonny struggled at first whether he should accept a speaking invitation at an Indian school graduation in South Dakota. He was often frustrated because non-Indians didn't know much about Indians. I heard him say, "I know about your heritage, why don't you know about mine?" He was well-read and made the effort to find out about other cultures and histories. He was an articulate and wide-ranging conversationalist. In 1983, Sonny founded the American Indian Registry for the Performing Arts, a nonprofit organization with a mission to compile a book of Native American actors and technicians from all over the continent. The book helped producers and casting agents find the Indians they claimed they couldn't find. The registry also pushed for cultural accuracy in scripts, something extremely important to Sonny. That was the picture. That was the painting he did for the cover of the book. Sonny's 12-year acting career included 11 feature films, 14 TV shows, some with multiple episodes, and 2 stage plays. He hosted gratis 2 Native American documentaries and several public service announcements. Images of the Indians he did for free. And the other one, Honor of All. He didn't want money for that. He served in the Navy from 1955 to 1957. He liked to joke that he thought he was drafted into the Army, but when he sobered up, he was in the Navy. Sometime after he was honorably discharged, he took flying lessons and became a pilot. Life was to be enjoyed, and so he did any way he could. He was married legally 4 times with numerous women friends in between and during his marriages. He fathered 10 children, 6 boys and 4 girls. Like his paintings, his children were scattered across the western United States. He never claimed to be something other than what he was. He would be the first to tell you he never denied anything he did. He always said, I'm my own man, nobody else's. Sonny did not have a chance to live a long life because scleroderma and complications of a heart-lung transplant claimed him at the age of 53. In our last years together, resigned to his premature death, I would tease him that when he passed, he would go out in a bolt of lightning with a crack of thunder. 3 days after his passing in Texas, there was a freak lightning event, complete with a loud thunderclap in the sky over my house in California. I was sitting alone in the backyard. Did anyone else see it? I saw it, and I felt it. My heart filled with the essence of his spirit, and I knew a Sonny charging out wild bull rider style. He was a Renaissance man, a towering figure of genuine mystery. Will Sampson would have preferred to be known as a man who painted. Mountains, thunderstorms, lightning, rain, they awe me. Man doesn't. Will Sampson, 1933 to 1987. I'd like to take this time to thank my executive producers, Clint and Sarah, my set designer, Sarah and May, my technical director, Alex Grossman, and there's going to be some music. I think Chilton, he's going to play. Yes. I'd like to take this rare opportunity this is a rare opportunity to own this limited edition book. It will not be sold at Barnes & Noble or Walmart. In fact, SoulFood Books is the only store in Washington where it can be purchased. It was a short run, and I have a 300 left, and I won't be printing any more. If you're interested in learning more about Mana's art, I'll be sitting somewhere to sign books and tell you a few more stories. Madol, thank you, Madol. Yeah, 50.
Wow, you are amazing, Zoe. Wow, what a great presentation.
You know, you laughed. He was fun.
You've got that across tonight.
He was fun.
Okay, I'll put that. Yeah, good. Another round of applause and thank you to Zoe. Wow. This is a place that honors great thoughts and great people. And it's been an extraordinary experience working with Zoe and her crew and putting tonight together. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break and get another round of coffee and then come back for some music and storytelling with Chioktan here tonight. Yeah.